All right, I want to post this video, and for the purpose of being able to use our graphing calculator to not only create a linear regression line or line of best fit, but also to find the intersection of two graphs. So solving a system of equation by graphing. So we're going to go through this session. What I'm using is our textbook. I'm on page 119 and I'm doing number 10. We did a lot of this in class, but I'd like to go through it, the entire process with you. I would have your calculator with you as you watch this video and go through these steps with me. If you get lost or if I'm going too fast, you can pause it or rewind it and then start where you need to start. But first of all, it's probably a good idea to go through and reset everything. So I'm going to press the second and then go down to the plus sign. You get a menu that looks like this, where you can you can scroll down to reset and press enter, to the defaults and reset. What that does is, if we press our graph, now it's a typical 10 by 10. The length goes from -10 to +10, and the height goes from -10 to +10. So our window is our typical window. If we have anything in the Y equals menu, we can clear that so that we can start fresh. That doesn't get rid of everything that's in our lists, though. So what I'm going to do is enter into our list. I'm on number 10 on page 119. I'm going to go to Stat, right here in the middle of the calculator, which you can see on the screen. And we're going to edit a list. So I'm just going to press enter. Now I have some stuff in my lists already, so what I'm going to do is highlight list 1 and press clear. I'm not going to press delete because that'll get rid of the entire list. I'm just going to press clear and enter. And I'm going to do the same thing with list 2. Press clear and enter. And now I'm going to start from scratch. And so I'm going to enter all of my years. I'm going to start with 1970, and then 1975, and 1980, 1985, 1990, 1995, and the year 2000. Then I'm going to go to list 2, and in list 2 I'm going to put in all of the pounds of broccoli per person, which starts as 0.5, and then 1.0, and then 1.4, and 2.6, 3.4, 4.4, and 5.7. And in list 3, I'm going to enter all of my cucumbers eaten per person, 2.6, and 2.6 again in 1975, and then 3.6, and then 4, and then 4.3, and then 5.2, and then 5.8. So now I have all of my lists that I want. What I want to do is graph those on the graphing part of the calculator. And so what I'm going to do is, it won't graph anything right now because the window isn't right. So if I go to Windows, my X values that I want to use are my years. I started at 1970, so I'm going to put in 1960 as my X minimum, and it went up to 2000. I'm going to put in 2010, and I'm going to count by 10 years as my scale. My Y minimum, hopefully you can see this, looks a little blurry maybe, but my Y minimum is, I'm going to start at, so I can see the y-intercept, I'm going to start at -1, and I think I put in a 5.8, so I'm going to go up to 7, and I'm going to count by ones. And now, if I still graph everything, I'm not going to be able to graph everything until I go to Y equals. There's nothing plotted here, so I want to go to the stat plot, which is right above Y equals. So I'm going to go second Y equals, and I'm going to turn the plot on. So I'm going to highlight, or I'm going to go to number 1, and I'm going to highlight on. I want a scatter plot. My X values I want to come from list 1. My Y values to come from list 2. The way you change that is, like I can go second and then press the 3, and that's list 3. But I want to go second, list 2. And I'm going to use plus signs for broccoli. If I graph that, those are my broccoli points. You can see as Americans we are eating more broccoli, at least in 2000, than we did in 1970. And it looks kind of linear, the growth does. We're going to do the same thing with cucumbers. I'm going to go to second and stat plot, and I'm going to go to plot 2, and I'm going to enter and turn that on. Again, a boxing or a scatter plot. I want my X values to come from list 1, but this time my Y values I want to come from list 3 because I want to use my cucumbers per person. And I am going to use squares. So now if I press graph, not only do I have my plus signs which represent the broccoli eaten per person per year, I also have the amount of cucumbers eaten per person per year. Now what I want to do is come up with a line of best fit. So I'm going to go back to the stat button in the middle of the calculator. I'm going to go to stat, except this time I'm going to move over to calculate, and I'm going to move to a linear regression line and press enter. The first thing you want to tell your calculator is where you want your X values to come from. I want my X values to come from list 1, so I'm going to press second and the 1, and then the comma, which is right above the 7, right here, comma. Then you want to tell the calculator where you want your Y values to come from. Since I'm doing broccoli, I want my Y values to come from list 2, so I'm going to press second and then 2, which is list 2, and then the comma. I want to put this entire equation in my Y1 graphing menu. So here's how we do that. This is kind of a long process. If you go to the vars button, which is right next to the clear button down here, I'm going to press vars. That gives me a menu that looks like this. I'm going to move over to Y variables. It is a function, so I'm going to press enter, and I want to put it in Y1, enter. So we have list 1, comma, list 2, comma, Y1. And now I'm going to press enter. And there's my equation. It gives me the A value, the B value, or the slope and the y-intercept. If I graph it, then there's my graph that represents the amount of broccoli eaten per person for those years. Now I want to do the same thing with the cucumbers eaten per person. So I'm going to go back to stat, and I'm going to calculate a linear regression line. Only this time, I want my X values to come from list 1 again, because those are the years, comma. I want my Y values to come from list 3, so I'm going to go hit second and then the 3, comma, because that's where the cucumbers are at. And then this time when I go to variables, vars again, I want Y variables, function, except this time I'm going to put it in Y2. And when I press enter, there's my function. If I press my Y equals, there's my first function that represents my broccoli, and my second function which represents the cucumbers per person. And if I graph both of them, where those two lines intersect, that's when we would be eating the same amount of broccoli as we do cucumbers per person in the United States. So how do we find where they intersect? Probably the easiest way to do that is, I don't know if it's exactly on my screen. It looks like it is on my screen. A couple of ways we can change that so that it is on our screen. We could change our window, or we could simply zoom out. If I press the zoom button and just go down to zoom out and press enter and enter again, you can see my points are all kind of in there a little bit squished. And now those points do, or those lines do intersect. To find the exact value, we can go to second and trace. There's a bunch of things we can find in here, a value, a 0, a minimum, a maximum. We want to go down to intersect. I'll press enter. And that should give me a little plus sign or a little spider going up and down on these curves, and it's asking me, is that the first curve? And yes it is. I'll press enter. And that one's highlighted. Is that the second curve? Yes it is. I'll press enter. And I could guess, or I could just press enter, and it'll tell me that in the year 2005, down here, it's kind of blurry on my screen here, but in 2005, Americans will have eaten 6.2 pounds of broccoli and 6.2 pounds of cucumbers per person. And that's how we find a point of intersection. So this is a good video to watch if you want to review that process. We are going to have a quiz coming up fairly soon where you're going to have to be able to do this not only by hand but with your calculator. And you can practice by doing this video. My suggestion then is to do this. Maybe do number 12, but do number 12 on that same page or number 11 on that same page with your calculator and see if you can get it all to work out. So if you have questions, you can see me in class. Good luck, and we'll see you tomorrow in school.